Okay, welcome back. This is the tabletop track for DragonCon. I'm the director of the tabletop track. My name is Rush Levivant, uh, award-winning and professional dungeon master. And with me today,
Hi,
as always,
I'm Abby. I've been volunteering with DragonCon for a while, so I'm just kind of a staple now.
yes, Abby is always with us and always helping us with everything, literally everything. Um, so today, what we're going to talk about is obviously there'll be a new edition of D&D coming out, and DragonCon will be on the eve of that new edition coming out. So, what is really funny is that I was able to actually find a number of people like Abby. She's not alone, by the way, who didn't know very much about the new edition. So instead of this being like probably 100 other videos where people are going line by line and giving their opinions about things, I'm going to get a fresh take, a first reaction, if you will.
Literally, all I know coming into this is that it exists, that it's coming out. I haven't looked into it because my philosophy is generally when it comes out, I'll learn about it.
Okay. Yeah, no worries about that. But I thought it would be very interesting to get not only a fresh take, but also this will help ground people into what it means to the community, because lots and lots of people are talking about the granular changes to the rules and what those will mean and that sort of thing. And again, you can watch those, and those will probably be done a lot better. But what we're going to do is what all of this means. So you know that there's a new edition of D&D coming out. So Abby, were you anticipating it, or like, I could take or leave, or what? How was your general feeling on it?
Whenever one D&D was being like announced and the whole OGL license debacle was going down, I was kind of like, okay, they're coming out with a new system.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, like 5e has been so ubiquitous for so long in my lifespan of playing D&D that there's a little bit of it to me that seems like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And so I'm just kind of curious what they're going to actually change and how that's going to fix it, you know?
Okay, so ambivalent, would that be a correct?
Yeah, like
Okay.
it's a new edition is a new edition, and I'll move to it if my friends are all playing it. But if we're all sticking with 5e, I'll stick with 5e.
Okay, so no complaints about where you are.
Yeah.
And yeah, and they're not trying to fix 5e, they're just trying to improve upon it, basically.
But
And
with
so,
what?
okay, well, I'm going to go over that. I'm going to go over the overall big themes of the game. So I used to be an English teacher, so I love talking about themes and looking at things from the outside and all that sort of thing. So the overall theme of this edition of D&D is, one, the core mechanics are like that of 5e. So to understand, if you were to play D&D and then AD&D that came later, those two systems would be wildly different.
Right.
Wildly. If you were to play second edition AD&D, that system was wildly different from first edition. Now, they were both compatible. If you had the first edition AD&D books and the second edition AD&D books, they would actually work together. And that is what I would compare this to. But just hear me out. Follow me. Stay with me. The difference between second edition AD&D and third edition AD&D were wildly different. The differences between 3 and 4 wildly different, and then 4 and 5 wildly different.
Mm-hmm.
This is not as wildly different. So you're still rolling a d20, obviously. You would always do that. But the numbers that you're adding and that sort of thing are very similar. Your proficiency bonus added to your ability bonus, all that sort of thing. The fact that the proficiencies are there, the same proficiencies. So to understand, in third edition, those things didn't look alike at all, right? Most people skip fourth edition, so we'll skip it as well. But fourth edition was also completely and totally different from fifth edition. This edition has those same proficiencies. It has the same. If you're rolling to hit, you add the same numbers together. You still have, your action, move, dash, disengage. All those things are still there. What they've added is they keep using this phrase, and I would agree. What they did was they added a lot of quality of life things to the game. So what do I mean by that? So for example, a lot of things that people were already doing in their game that they had homebrewed in, they went ahead and adopted them. So for example, most people, when they get inspiration, they use it like a reroll, right? Like, oh, I didn't roll well. Can I use a point of inspiration to roll again? Yes. Well, by the rules as written, no, you have to spend inspiration before you roll an extra d20. Now, people, now that's officially adopted. It's called heroic inspiration, and if you roll and you don't like the result of your roll, you can spend inspiration to roll again.
So it's more like a luck point.
Yes, it's a lot more like a luck point.
That makes more sense.
Drinking a healing potion, for example, is now a bonus action, which a lot of GMs were already doing.
And is feeding it to somebody else still at full action?
I don't know. That I simply don't know. But there's a lot of things like that there in the game where your bonus action is used for a lot more things now to add to your quote unquote quality of life.
Honestly, thank goodness, because the bonus action is so underutilized because so little is usable in a bonus action.
Right. That's exactly right. So a lot of things that people were kind of sort of already doing are now codified in the rules, and they're like, yeah. So it's more about getting out of your way and letting you get to the fun. So that's the overall theme. And then what they did was they rebalanced a lot of the subclasses, because a lot of the subclasses that were not that great just kind of got ignored.
Right.
So that is much less of a thing now. As they were going through all the updates, a lot of the subclasses were like, oh, people are really excited about them. So, for example, the illusionist.
For a while, is that like D&D subclasses do not give you the building blocks to form a customizable class. Instead, they give you a single Gundam set.
Right. And
so there's still a lot to it. You're still putting it together, but you can't really deviate from that. It's not like a set where you can put it together one way and get one thing, and then put it together a different way and get a different thing. And that is one thing I kind of wish D&D would do more of, is that basic building block style, just because then I have to buy so many more source books to get these subclasses that are individualized.
Well, so yeah, why don't we go ahead and just get into it? That has not only has that not changed, B, if that is an issue that you have, that issue has become more prominent.
Oh, yeah, because it's marketing.
Yeah, and yeah, it's also what the general populace of D&D wanted, the core fan base.
But here's the thing: is if you give them building blocks to make customizing subclasses, they don't have to give you 50 new different subclasses, because you can do it yourself. That's what I'm trying to say. No. People want different subclasses, and that makes total sense. And so they said, great, here's 6 new books you can buy for all these new subclasses.
Right.
And D&D, in my opinion, does have a major problem of too many classes and too many subclasses.
Okay, got it. So to that point, all the classes will now have 4 subclasses. And then
in the core book or in across?
No, in the core book.
Yeah.
But yes, they've already left certain things out that are clearly that you clearly are going to need a source book for. Mm-hmm. So, for example, the wizards only have 4 subclasses, and each one of the schools of magic is its own subclass. Yeah. So only 4 of those are represented.
That's one of the things that's always frustrated me about wizards, is that the schools of magic as a subclass are not really functionally any different
So that has changed. They have now made it so that all those subclasses for the different schools of magic now feel a lot more different and distinct. So my favorite changes are the ones they made to the wizard for that reason.
Is there a chance that if you are an evocation wizard in the School of Evocation, that you can cast evocation spells as a bonus action?
I think,
or for half spell slot or whatever.
I think there's something like that, but not exactly like that. I cannot recall off the top of my head, but just really quick. So, for example, if you're an Abjurer, you're going to get this force field that will protect you, and you can recharge that force field.
Mm-hmm.
You will, here to your point of what you're talking about, if you cast Counterspell and it doesn't go off for some reason, you don't lose it. And at 10th level, you can cast Dispel Magic as a bonus action.
That's cool. Okay.
Right. So they are gonna have stuff like that. I think there is something like I could be wrong, but I think there's something like that for evokers at later levels, but you can only do it like so many times.
One of the problems that I see a lot with wizards is that it's like you can learn spells faster. Great. When are we actually doing downtime?
Right. Exactly. So some of that has been, a lot of that has been mitigated. Like you will automatically get spells of your school. Another example of how they've made all the different wizard subclasses different. So, for example, the illusionist can now make illusions silently.
Nice.
They wanted the illusionist to be able to be more tricksy and tricky. They can also now, there's another feature they have called Phantasmal Creatures. So you can cast a summoning spell, and if you summon a bear, for the longest time, why summon this big ferocious bear, but as soon as they touch it, it disappears, or it's obviously an illusion. The bear will now have half the hit points of a normal bear.
Makes sense, yeah.
So that's exclusionary to illusionists. So that's kind of cool. The bear actually pushed me or did a little damage. Now I believe it's a bear, that kind of thing. And then they also have that really great feature, I think, that was that they had before, which is you can create an illusionary bridge. Everybody can cross it because it's quasi-real, and then you can decide, no, it's just an illusion. And then when the enemies try to cross the bridge after you, they fall through the illusion. That's
so funny.
Right.
It makes me think of the Sage's bridge to Ganon's castle in Ocarina of Time, and when in the cutscene, Link's like, "Is this? Let me make sure before I walk across it."
Right. It's kind of like that thing. So the improvements to Wizards, in my opinion, are the best, my favorite, because they really do feel different. They really did give them different identities and different things they could do.
And those seem like logical changes, because like if you are an expert in illusion magic, your illusion spell should be better than an evocation expert's illusion spell.
Right. That's a great point. And the thing I was most impressed by in all of that is that Wizards have not, to your point, Wizards have not really changed fundamentally since like second edition. The stuff they could do was there were a few bones they were thrown, a few little things they could do, but fundamentally they were the same as they have been for ages. Mm-hmm. So now they actually feel very different. One of the big changes is for everybody. So we're going back to the big, huge overall view and quality of life improvements is the idea of weapon masteries. So if you get weapon mastery in a certain weapon, it will be able to do extra stuff. So if you have, say, a large hook, you can trip people. If you have this kind of weapon, you can you can attack and push. It doesn't do anything else to do. There's certain weapons like rapiers or daggers that have an ability called Nick, where you can make an extra attack, and if you do, it doesn't cost your bonus action. So if you have two weapons and one of them is a Nick weapon, you can make an extra attack, and it doesn't cost you a bonus action. So
that makes sense.
So yeah, all these weapon masteries feature heavily into the fighter. So the fighter is going to be can have lots of options, lots of things that they can do. And it'll also feature other characters too. So if you're a barbarian, there'll be certain weapons that you can get weapon masteries in. So your barbarian will be able to do extra stuff besides damage. So the damage will be there, and then there'll be guess what, something else.
This sounds like it's kind of making it more realistic in, the way that fantasy can be realistic. But, again, kind of with, if you are an expert in this school of magic, those spells should be better for you. Real life has a lot of, rapier dagger. You faint with the rapier, stab with the dagger. Like there's a lot of that in real life. And it's kind of a shame that gets lost in older editions of D&D. So I'm excited about these.
Okay, cool. So those are some of the bigger changes. Let's see. So your stat bonuses are now tied to your background. So the different D&D races are now going to be called species.
I don't like that. I hate that.
I knew you weren't going to like that, but that's what they're now called, species. Okay. But your stat bonuses and all that.
Ancestries, lineages.
I understand. Pathfinder went ancestries a long time ago. Like a long time ago. But D&D said, no, we're going to go to species.
It's just yuck. That's worse.
Okay. So, but you don't get, if you're an elf, you don't get any stat bonuses for, say, dexterity or charisma or whatever. That's all tied to your background.
Would you still get dark vision as an elf?
Yes.
Okay.
But so let's say you were a soldier. They'll give you 3 stats, and you can give each one of those stats a +1, or one of those stats a +2, and another +1, etc. You can't give anything a +3. And the reason they said they wanted to do that was because, well, they didn't want to make the backgrounds like locked in, because like, well, what kind of soldier were you? Maybe you were like a quick and fast soldier. Maybe you were more of I carry all the weight soldier kind of thing. I was more of the logistics guy. So
I like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's good. That it's tied to background instead.
They will now finally have a crafting system so that you can craft magical items and things like that, which was not there before.
Okay.
Okay. So we went over the fighter, and then we went over the wizard. The barbarian, well, the 4 subclasses will be the berserker, path of the world tree, path of the zealot, and path of the wild heart. So to give you an example of how they made things very different for all of them, the path of the world tree, you call upon Yggdrasil to grant you certain buffs that you can also give to the party, and you can teleport around or teleport your opponents around.
That's interesting.
Right. So you're going to have rage, sure, but you're going to also have those other things. So again, that makes the path of the world tree more distinctive, more different in flavor than from the traditional barbarian, which I think the barbarian needed. A lot of those subclasses were not that great, and a lot of them kind of blended together. So it was just like, well, you're a barbarian, and your subclass really didn't mean much in my. But now it will mean a lot more. For the bard, you're going to have the College of Lore, College of Valor, College of Dance, and College of Glamour. Now, the College of Dance will be interesting because you'll be moving around on the battlefield, and you'll be able to use your reaction to damage opponents that you pass by or pass you by.
I love the idea of like a ballerina bard just kicking someone's throat out like a kangaroo.
Yes, that's kind of what they were going for. And Ginny D has a whole review on it, that kind of thing.
I'm sure she loves that.
Right, and it's a great video.
That sounds up her alley, to be honest.
The druid I don't know too much about the cleric because they haven't talked about that quite yet. I do know that healing spells will, instead of being a D8, will start at 2D8.
Okay.
And I think the healing goes up like that, like a second level healing is like 48, etc. Because before it was like you really, to get any decent kind of healing, you had to really spend like third, fourth level spell slots to get like any kind of decent healing, especially if you roll low. So that is my understanding with that. With druids, you have the circle of the land, circle of the moon, circle of the sea, and circle of the stars.
So really, the sea is the only additional. The rest are the same.
Right. So circle of the sea, that they immediately said that they don't want a character to become like Aquaman and like, okay, I'm not in the ocean, I can't do anything. So they gave the circle of the sea a bunch of storm powers where you can like push people with like wind or water or things like that, a number of storm powers or wield lightning so that you're not, twiddling your thumbs when you're out of the ocean. Circle of the Stars I thought was interesting, is from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. That's the one where if you can call upon different constellations, and when you call upon those constellations, they let you wild shape and do something else.
I think maybe Omega played a Circle of Stars druid in Transplanar, perhaps. I have to double check, but I think maybe they played that.
And I think they changed for, if you're a Circle of the Moon, when you wild shape, that's a bonus action.
That makes so much sense. Thank God.
Right. So that's something that a lot of people were doing anyway, right? This is what I mean by the quality of life improvements. Things that, like you said, make sense. Like, again, it's allowing you to get back to the fun.
Yeah. Because I think if we're not doing like the painful werewolf old Hollywood transformation, it should be pretty like, you jump and just turn into it. You see it in fantasy all the time. I think even the live action Mulan did it, where she just turns into a bird, and that's the end of that. It takes like a second.
Right. Yeah. And then in the movie now, right, it takes just a second.
Right. Exactly. With the druid.
And
our 1.5 second transformation into an owlbear. Right.
And I think this is just a quick aside, but I think that really comes from when the druid was first introduced in AD&D, because it wasn't super clear how long it took to change, and nevertheless, even if it was mentioned somewhere how long it took to change, you could keep. I was telling my son this. You could keep changing.
Mm-hmm.
You could change like a whole bunch of times, and so it was a lot like the movie portrays. And so because you could keep changing to like, well, I turned into a fish, now I turned into a deer, and then I turned into a bear. Because of that, it kind of became house ruled, homebrewed into it that it didn't take very long, because you could do it so many times.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that's been like you're implying that's been long overdue.
Yeah, I agree.
So the fighter will have the battle master, the champion, the eldritch knight, and the psionic warrior. So one of the big things they're changing is there's going to be a lot more psionic stuff.
I thought you said sciatic, like sciatica, and I was like,
no. I'm sorry, psionic. So there'll be a lot more. So I don't know how some people are going to feel about that, like a lot more psychic things.
I think the fighter mechanics are really cool. The fighter subclasses mostly are so boring and always have been.
Okay, so right, they're trying to change that. So
even like the Eldritch Knight, I think it's boring. Echo Knight, boring.
Got it.
Like, I just think they're so boring.
So real quick, the champion is still going to be the subclass that you want. Someone showed up and they're not good with lots of different kinds of rules and lots of different kind of choices. They just want to play this, and they want their choices or options to be very, very clear. That's still going to be the champion. So improved chance for criticals, better damage overall, and very narrow choices, because this is, I don't know how to play D&D very well. Well, here you go. This is your class.
Mm-hmm. I also like with the fighter, I don't know. I feel like conceptually and thematically, they are so similar to a barbarian, cleric, and paladin. And again, going back to the building blocks of subclasses and customization, I'm like, why do we have 4 different classes with infinite numbers of subclasses for each when we could have just had one class and then kind of split them into those categories? And similar with like the paladin having the oath of devotion and to the wizard colleges, there's very little functional real difference. And so I just kind of feel like there could be a bit more overlap in the martial classes in particular.
Got it. So I guess the more you talk about this, some of that will be there with the weapon masteries, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you really wanted like a bunch of Lego pieces to put your class together, the weapon masteries sound like the way to go, right? I want the person I'm envisioning in my mind is blank, so I'm going to have them use these weapons and take these feats, and they're going to lean into this vision in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So the battle master will continue to be the battle master. All they're going to have more maneuvers that they can do. So a lot more options on the battlefield, a lot more things like tripping. I move you, or I hit, like just like in Baldur's Gate 3, I hit you. I hit this opponent. Now I'm going to give somebody else a bonus action to move. I hit this opponent. Now everybody else gets an advantage to hit them. So they will continue to have lots and lots of options. The Eldritch Knight, this was cool. They will be able to cast a cantrip as one of their attacks.
Okay.
So if you get 2 attacks, you could attack with your sword and then use one of your attacks to, say, throw a firebolt.
That feels very Witcher to me.
Right. That's what they're going for with Eldritch Knight. And then I think, if I'm not mistaken, you'll be able to do that with like a first level spell, once per short rest or once per long rest, something like that as well. So that will be pretty cool, to hit somebody and then throw a magic missile. Yeah, go ahead.
This is one of the things, like for me with like the Dragon Age system that I really like, though, is like there's 3 classes and then you can pick your weapon mastery within those, and then you get your subclasses. And it just, I feel like D&D could really benefit, again, on the building blocks thing, from more of a subclass tree system.
A subclass tree system? Okay. Like,
okay, so you want to play a martial class. Great. Okay. Do you want to be, more rogue or fighter type? Like kind of start there. And you're like, okay, you've picked rogue. So now are you going to be, this type of rogue or that type of rogue? And you just kind of keep moving down the trees. Right.
And there are systems that are like that. Now, okay, so I'm curious, because when I started this out, I was like, what were you hoping for? That sounds like you were hoping for more of that.
Well, here's the thing. I wasn't hoping for it because I knew D&D wasn't going to give it to me.
Gotcha. Yeah. That's very fair. D&D has usually been about your class.
Yeah. That is always a system I hope for, because I think it grants more customization. But I also know that D&D is never going to do that. So I'm not going to get my hopes up knowing they're not going to be met.
Right. Because D&D is always going to have those classes, right?
The individualized Gundam classes, yeah.
Right. There are, of course, systems that have no class at all. And that was kind of interesting. So let's take a quick segue on that. So way, way, way back in the day, Shadowrun came out, and you could pick an archetype, like I'm a street samurai, I'm a hacker, I'm a street mage, etc. But there was no class that said this is what you instead selected certain abilities, and then you said, this is what I am. They just gave you the archetype to be like, so that you had something to hold on to.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough, something similar happens right now with Savage Worlds, which is a very popular system. That system has no classes at all. You once you have made your character, you kind of just declare I'm a blank for the sake of the game master and everybody at the table, so they know what to attach to you when you are role playing your whatever it is. Interesting. Do you have systems or games that you've played that are like that are more like building blocks?
I would say that the Dragon Age system is a bit more like that. And not that you're still kind of locked into your type being rogue, warrior, or mage, but there's a lot of playing around in those, I think. Quest also has a bit more playing around because your subclass abilities are not determined by, oh, you've reached this level, now you get this thing. It's, okay, you've reached this level, you get X number of points to spend on a cool ability.
Gotcha. All right. We're going to keep going. We took a little segue, which is fine. Monk has Warrior of the Open Hand, which is this is another class change that I've enjoyed because I like so far, because before that was pretty much the only monk that anybody ever played was the Monk of the Open Hand. But now you can be a Warrior of the Open Hand, a Warrior of the Elements, which makes you a lot like one of the element benders from Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Of course, hell yeah.
So yeah, it really fits, and it's very cool. So you could play a monk that throws fire, water, or earth, or that sort of thing, and then you could be a Warrior of the Shadow, which makes you a lot more like an assassin.
So I can be the Avatar, or I can be a Sheikah.
Right. Yes, that's exactly right. The Paladin has the most controversial change to it. Before, you could, as long as you could attack, you could keep smiting, pretty much, if you had spell slots to spend. Now you will be limited to smiting one time around, which I'm okay with that, because I always thought it was a bit weird. Like you're smiting is supposed to be this big climactic thing, but if you're smiting like 3 times in a round, it's like, that to me was always weird. But some people obviously don't like that, because you could do an incredible amount of damage by just smiting a whole bunch of times.
The Paladin smite was the min-maxer's favorite feature.
Right. However, as somebody pointed out, because the Paladin has a lot of things that it can do, and now in this edition more so. So if you're playing a Paladin, you won't be constantly nickel and diming yourself to make sure you get the maximum amount of smites for the maximum amount of damage. Instead, you'll be looking at the other things you can do. So for example, the Paladins have Oath of Devotion, Oath of Vengeance, Oath of the Ancients, and Oath of Glory. Oathbreaker is gone. They don't have that, interestingly enough. But I
wonder if it's gone, or just in another source book.
Well, we'll have to see. But so one of the subclasses, for example, when you summon your steed, it doesn't take you long to do it, and like your steed has actual stuff that a lot more stuff that it can do. So your companion, it will be more of a companion that will add a lot more to your functionality as a paladin. So that's the kind of thing that they're going for. Okay, Ranger.
I was just about to ask.
Okay. They're going to have the Hunter, the Beastmaster, the Gloomstalker, and the Fey Wanderer. And
those are all cool classes. I like those.
And one of the things that to again exemplify how they're trying to change the functionality of all the classes, they basically said if you have a Fey in your subclass, they're going to try to give you abilities and powers that will allow you to shift and teleport around the battlefield. So the Fey Wanderer will have a lot of that.
Lots of shifting and teleporting around a battlefield, I see, in this new edition.
Yes. That they are definitely going for that. I think
I think that's a bit of an over. That sounds like a bit of an over response to people not disengaging without using the disengage feature because they're going to take attack of opportunity.
now that you mention it, I think you're right.
That sounds like an overcorrection on that front.
I think you're right. I think also that people really loved Misty Step.
Oh yeah, Misty Step's great.
So I think they're trying to add a lot of that.
It's just kind of weird that it sounds like they're kind of giving it to everybody.
No, not everybody, but a lot of people. I see what you're saying. I mean, valid point. Very valid point. Yeah, go ahead.
Has Beastmaster changed much, considering the Steed now has more stuff to do?
Yes. I don't have really solid information, but the beasts will be a lot more substantial, a lot better. I think they'll probably be a lot more like the Beastmaster in Baldur's Gate 3, which the Beastmaster in Baldur's Gate 3 is like amazing. Like totally.
Haven't played it yet.
I know you haven't played it yet, but like,
Can't speak to it.
like because the beasts you summon are fantastic. They're great. So it's going to be a lot more like that. Where before the Beastmaster Ranger, the beasts that you summoned were okay.
Well, they were okay, and you kind of had to sacrifice your turn in favor of your beast.
Yes, that I don't think that's going to happen in this edition.
That sounds more fun.
Right, exactly. They're trying to do that. For Rogue, interestingly enough, every video on Rogue went into deep detail on one change made to the assassin. In my opinion, like unnecessarily so. But real quick, for the Rogue, you have your Thief, your Assassin, Arcane Trickster, and Psionic Soul Knife. So again, another psychic class.
Okay.
So yeah, if people don't like psionics in their game, I don't know. You're gonna have to ban those.
It's not even that I don't like psionics. It's just the fact that we've now have two where it's in the core rulebook that they get psionics, and I'm like, okay.
Right.
If the intent is to make these classes feel more fun and special, then why is everyone getting them? It's the same thing with the teleportation for me. It's like, and it's the same problem I have with almost every class having access to spells without having to do any like actual work for them. I'm like, then like if I can do the same spells as a ranger and as a druid, then what's the point of having two different classes?
Right. That's a old. How can I explain this? That's a sentiment that there you go. That's a sentiment that I've had since way back because old editions, so a lot of the classes couldn't cast spells, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you were a spellcaster, that was like, oh, okay, you can actually use magic. But now that suddenly changed to like lots of people can use magic. So
and it's, I don't know, like because you do have like less spell slots if you're like a ranger or a rogue, arcane trickster, whatever. There is still a difference, and you do have to rely on your physical weaponry a little bit more, but it is weird that they have so many spells available to them, even though that's not really the intent of their class.
Right. I think now that we're talking about it, I think how that happened was spells in D&D is a certain mechanic, and people were like, well, we're going to use this mechanic to describe a ranger's ability to do X or Y. And that maybe perhaps was a bad fit, but nevertheless, here we are.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, your point is perfectly valid.
I just think it's weird. And honestly, to me, it comes across as rangers wanted to cast spells, and instead of saying, okay, that's basically a druid, let's make it where you can kind of be you can be this nature type and then be a little more magic-y or a little bit more, weaponry. And then going with the tree, like I mentioned earlier, they said, let me give you 6 new subclasses.
That's interesting that you mentioned that because
that you have to buy. That's what that reads as to me.
When I designed 3-page RPG, I actually designed it for exactly what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
That you could dip into this or that and kind of build things together, kind of like Lego pieces.
Yeah.
And I designed my system to be like that for the reason that you just stated.
And
Go ahead.
I think one of my pet peeves, like and truly where the root of this all kind of comes from, is that when we get new subclasses in whatever supplemental material is being released or new editions are being released, it's presented as this, you're getting more customizing options. And I'm like, no, I'm getting more options.
Mhm.
I'm not getting more customization because you're still locking me into this one singular, to use analogy again, one singular Gundam set, as opposed to the world is my oyster Lego set.
So, okay, now we're finally getting to.
That's where the root of my like is that it's always like you can customize, and I'm like, no, I can't. I can pick this class.
So, okay, we're finally getting to the core of what I wanted this video to be about was, yeah, taking the temperature, feeling how you felt about this. So you're like, it's not quite what I wanted. This is what I'm hearing. Okay. I'm hearing it's not quite what I wanted.
And it was never going to be. Like,
right. You knew it was never going to be, but you have no problems with 5e, right?
Not very many, no.
Okay.
And it sounds like the mechanical issues that I have with 5e that I expected to receive changes are getting changes, like the Beastmaster and like the potion as a bonus action, like things like that. I'm like, okay, these are improvements, but at its core of what D&D is, it's not really what I want in a system that is as big as D&D.
Got it. Okay, got it. Yes, thank you. That is the core of what I was trying to get to.
So, I mean, I feel very neutral about it.
Yeah, that's fine. I was just taking the temperature and being like, I wonder if this is of somebody who doesn't actually know much about the upgrades or the changes rather. How do you feel about it? What is your response? And I think you've given a great response. So because it's not just one thing or another, right? I'm just going to be frank. A lot of like videos are like, well, this is how I feel about it, and maybe they might give a second dimension. Like I feel about this, but no, there's a lot of things you feel about it. And so that's what I was hoping to get to. Yeah. That's awesome. That's great.
And I think too, one of the other things with all the classes that is definitely tricky, because I'm constantly having to introduce people to D&D to be able to play. Like there's no one around me, like physically around me, who plays a lot or knows how to play. So every time I do an in-person game, I have to teach people how to play and how to build a character. And that's fine, but it's so frustrating to have someone open up the book and see all the different classes, all the different subclasses and go, what?
Right.
When we could make this so much more accessible by doing these little trees. And it's like, because now I have to do the work as the person teaching them to say, do you want to fight with weapons or do you want to fight with magic? And then we get into the weapons classes and they're like, I thought this didn't have magic. And I'm like, well, yeah, they all do.
Right. So, but okay, right. But you seem to be really married to this whole tree thing. Like you really like that.
I do really like that because I think it's more accessible and it's more customizable.
Well, what about a system, say like Savage Worlds, where there's no tree? It's all Lego pieces. What do you feel about that?
I haven't played it, so I don't know.
Well, I know, but you know what I'm talking about, right? If I just present it in, okay, so on the one hand, you've got what you're talking about, a tree, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to choose A, B, and C. And if you choose A, now you have to choose 1, 2, or 3, etc. D&D is kind of doing that, but in a much more limited fashion, let's say. Okay. So you have that.
Because you have like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 under A, and then continued.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
And then it stops. That's the end of it.
Okay. So what if you had a system that was just a whole bunch of jumble of stuff?
Could be fun.
Okay. Do you think you would like that better than the tree, or no, you like the tree?
I don't know, and I think it depends. Like, one, I'd have to play it to know for sure.
Sure.
And I think it depends on the group that's playing, because I think, again, if you're trying to make it accessible to new players, the tree is kind of the best method because it limits your options but still gives you customize. So you're not saying, okay, I've picked this, but man, I really wish I had this thing that's from this other piece. You have these other options within that. But I don't, I think the full jumble of Lego blocks can be very fun if you are willing to go in and piece it all together. But if you don't know anything of what you're doing and you don't know what any of this means yet, then that's going to be hard.
Got it. Okay.
And it's sort of the opposite problem with D&D. They're both hard, but they're hard in different ways because D&D just gives you so many options. You're locked into those options, but there's just so much to sift through. But what if I want something else? I don't know what this one does yet. And I'm like, you're not gonna until you play it. And that's kind of the bad news.
Right. So this is one of the larger issues with D&D that I've been noticing. Well, I've known this for a long time, but I'm noticing coming to the forefront more and more. And it's not a problem that D&D can ever fix very easily.
No, they're going to have to totally rehaul the system, which they're not going to do.
Right. It wouldn't feel like D&D anymore.
Right.
If it was, like you said, so simple, I don't think it would feel like D&D to most people. So they would be like, no thanks. Because they already tried that with 4th edition.
Yeah.
4th edition, while complicated, didn't feel like D&D to a lot of people. So no. But that is one of the biggest issues with D&D that I think actually AI could kind of help is the onboarding of it. So I meet a lot of young people, a ton of young people that want to play D&D desperately, but unsurprisingly, they don't want to read a textbook to do it because that's what it is. And for most hobbies, you don't have to read a textbook. If we want to play tennis, we can go grab some rackets and you will suck at first, but you will be on the court with a ball with a racket in your hand and we will mess around. D&D, if you want to be a game master, you have to at least have read like 50% of the book.
Well, you can just jump in, but it won't make you a good one.
Right. And actually that's what a lot of people do is they just jump in and they're just kind of making it up as they go. And as they, that's how me and my friends did it. And as you go along, as the years pass, you sort of slowly start to learn the rules and you slowly learn how to do it the old-fashioned, the old-fashioned way, all that sort of thing. But that's an uncomfortable way to engage with your hobby, right?
I don't know. The thing for me with like reading the textbook and knowing the rules as written is the book and the rules are what separates this from playing pretend on the playground.
Right.
Because when you don't have the rules, there's nothing that stops you from, I pull out a bigger sword. Well, I put the shield up, and it's just like kids playing pretend,
right.
Which is fine if that's what you want to do. But then you're not playing D&D. You're not playing a game.
Right. So, yeah, no, I agree 100%. But there are much simpler games that have very defined and codified rules that prevent what I always do is I say prevent it from being a pass the stick storytelling game where I tell part of the story, I pass you the stick and then you tell part of the story and then you pass it back.
Right.
To prevent that, yes, you have to have rules to make it a game. And the reason that's fun is that now you have an intercessor in your storytelling game where it's like, oh, you can't do that actually because there are these rules. And then that actually makes you more creative.
Exactly.
And then you have the dice, which also act like an intercessor because you're like, okay, and I jump out the window into the moat, and then I say, no, actually, you hit your head on the window and it cracks, but you don't jump through the window. And so now it's really fun because something unexpected happened.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the core of D&D, obviously, but D&D has to be complicated because that's what it's been for a long time. And in my opinion, I don't know if WotC will develop this, but if someone would develop AI to help you with the rules and things like that, where you could just say, generally speaking, I'd like to do this. And the AI says, okay, here are your options. I think that would go a long way to helping onboard more people
Mm-hmm.
D&D, especially like a game master coach. Like I don't know how to play D&D very well at all. I know some of the basic rules. Okay, well, here's the game master coach to help you with what rules you need to know. And that's where I see AI being the most useful for D&D. But a lot of people are worried about AI dungeon masters and stuff like that. I'm personally not worried about that because I messed around with that, and it's fun and it's cute, but it doesn't scratch the same itch.
I mean, that's the thing with a lot of AI is it could be just cute, but people are trying to adapt it to take over creative fields.
Right.
If they weren't doing that, then we could just have, oh, that's cute.
Right. No.
Let me go find a real one.
Right. I think, yeah, that's the tragedy of it. I think it's too bad that people are trying to use it to like, well, we're going to have AI game masters. I'm like, well, you can do that if you want, but you're missing the opportunity. That's it. You're missing the opportunity.
Right.
The great opportunity would be to have it as a coach / assistant.
I mean, D&D Beyond has some element of that. Not like the AI.
Yes.
Like brain behind it, I guess. But you have your sheet and you can just click that thing and it will roll it for you.
Oh, 100%. A lot of people can't play D&D without D&D Beyond. So D&D Beyond.
Honestly, I never want to do D&D without at least the character sheet. Now, I always want to have physical dice because I feel more ownership when I fail with the dice in my hand, as opposed to the computer that feels like it just kind of screwed me over. Mm-hmm. But I like having it all written out is so much easier than having to write it myself and type it and squeeze it into these little boxes on the paper sheet. I love the D&D Beyond character sheet.
Well, it's not just play with it. A lot of people, like you're saying, I have some people who use Hero Lab for my Pathfinder 1 game, and Pathfinder 1 is like extraordinarily complicated.
Mm-hmm.
But they can do things like, oh, I have this condition now. I've had Hero's Feast, so it changes all the numbers on your sheet, so you don't have to have like a spreadsheet over here or do all of this extra math or whatever. I'm frightened now, so this means that I just click on this and it does it for me. Mm-hmm. That is exactly what D&D needs to do more of, in my opinion. Lean into that more, but not. I think if it could lean into that for game masters and help game masters do stuff like that, it would have even more players, because there's so many people. Again, there's so many people who want to play D&D but can't because of the barrier.
Again, because it's dense to get through, and if they don't have someone there to say, all right, here's the breakdown.
Right. So great. Actually, that was a great segue from what I wanted to talk about, like this new edition. What does it mean? What does D&D really need? Right. Mm-hmm. And then what were you expecting / hoping for? Like, how do you feel about it now? So fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. This, I don't think this could have gone any better, to be honest. Because I wanted a raw take that wasn't, I hate it or I love it, or these are 3 things you got to know about the new edition of D&D. I didn't want that. Because that's not how that is.
I love the 3 things I've got to know, and I'm like, well, I'll figure them out when it comes out, baby. Like,
right. And that's how most people are. People won't acknowledge it, but that's how most people are.
Mm-hmm. I feel like Toph in Avatar being like, oh, never mind. If it's important, I'll find out.
Right.
So.
Well, very cool. And I think that covers it for this episode. So thank you all for tuning in and watching. And I will leave you with this. Roles were played. No, I apologize. Dice were rolled. Roles were played. And play was fun. And what else is there in life if not play? All right. We'll see you next time.